Hey everybody, it's Andy Cloudy Mulder, and yes, you did read the title of this video correctly. This is a video about death metal, something many of you no doubt would have thought you would never hear me talking about on this channel. So why am I talking about it on this channel? Well, browsing on Amazon a while ago now, probably about 6 weeks ago at least, I came across a copy of Entombed Left Hand Path. This is the earache, it was an FDR release, and I've heard many people talking about this. It was super cheap. I was buying some stuff, so I chucked it in my basket and thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a listen. There are lots of good friends of mine that rave about this kind of stuff, so I thought, why not give it a go? I can always sell it on eBay if I don't like it. And lo and behold, I did actually quite like it. It was very different from what I was expecting, and it got me thinking, what else out there can I listen to? And around the same time, Matt from the Accusation Network put out a 30 death metal albums in 30 days challenge, and he was saying that people should go out and discover new death metal bands and listen to them. Well, just about every death metal band is new to me, so I thought I would focus specifically on around the oranges, the beginnings of death metal. So what you'll see in this video is 30 debut albums from bands that released those albums between 1987 and 1993. I thought that was a nice sweet spot. And not knowing really where to start, I prompted a few familiar names in the VC and asked them what their top 5 death metal debut albums were. So that was Mark G with a C, Metal Mickey, Scott the Rock Scout, Liam the Death Doom Metalhead, Mr. Boulder James, Matt himself from the Accusation Network, and Thomas from Merciful Metal. I asked them to give me their top 5 death metal debut albums. I also did reach out to Jürgen as well, Jürgen Allmann, and asked him about German death metal, because I wasn't seeing many German bands came in. I thought surely Germany must be big on death metal, but he said no, they're not. But he gave me a few bands anyway. So out of those bands that people recommended their debuts of, anything that was in that sweet spot between 87 and 93, I put on my list, and it came to about 15, 16 albums. So I still had to find 14 myself. So I went away and did a little bit of research, and found additional 14 albums from sort of best of lists I could find on the internet, and also just bands that I thought just sounded death metal in either their album titles, their album art, or the name of the band themselves. So I'm going to show you those 30 albums. It was roughly about 30 days I went through them. I have listened to all of these albums only once. There's some that I have actually ended up buying, if I'm honest, but I'll show those in a separate video, show my fledgling death metal collection in a separate video. But bearing in mind that most of these albums I've only heard of once, I've made some notes, and you can't necessarily form a lasting opinion with one listen, and I'm also aware that these are probably not considered the 30 best death metal albums of all time. In fact, these are probably not considered to be the best albums by the bands that I'm going to show anyway. So I need you guys to tell me where to go next. Are there some classic debut albums that I have missed off this list that you think I really should hear? Maybe where I should go next with some of these albums. If you think some of these albums I'm showing are not the best albums by these bands, let me know which other albums in the discography I should maybe go to next. I'm willing to listen to it a little bit more. I'm a bit burned out on it at the moment, but we shall see. So I've got 30 albums, all between 87 and 93, from a host of different countries, mostly the US and Sweden. And I'll let you know who recommended what as we go through. So we'll start with the first one I listened to, and that was A Left Hand Path by Entombed. I love the solos and everything here as well. I say that it really sort of piqued my appetite to see what else was out there. So this was on the list of Mark G, Mr. Boulder, and Merciful Metal. Next up, I listened to Massacre from Beyond, 1991 US death metal. This was very accessible for me, very thrashy, and that's not really what my understanding of death metal was. I knew it was kind of beyond thrash and extreme, but I didn't realise it was often so close together those genres were, and I really enjoyed this album. Again, Mark G, this was the Rock Scout as well, and Matt all recommended this one as well. Now, the order I listened to these was completely random. I had my 30. Every time I listened to one, I re-randomised the list, and the one that was at the top I listened to. And Morbid Angels, Altar of Madness, 1989, US again. This one popped up next. Now, I promised myself I would give every album a fair listen from start to finish. Even if I hated the first 4 or 5 songs, I would go through and listen to the whole thing and form, albeit a one-listen opinion on it, but at least on the whole album. Now, if I hadn't had that rule in place, this Morbid Angel album wouldn't have got past the first song. Was it Immortal Rights? It completely put me off, but then it really got good after that, and I really liked the rest of the album. Songs like Maze of Torment. It seems also that Mr. Boulder, Thomas, Rock Scout, Metal Mickey, and Matt all thought the same as well, because they all had this one on their list too. After this, it was Dismembers Like an Ever-Flowing Stream from 1991, Swedish death metal this time. There was less in the way of gratuitous solos on here, and I kind of like those on this sort of extremer form of metal. Very short album, I thought, though, as well. A little bit sort of they were like a death metal Motorhead. Found the songs to be a little bit monotonous. It wasn't bad, but it's not really my thing, and but it is Mark G's thing. Now, in terms of what I should say about the style of the albums that I've picked, is I know death metal is kind of quite a wide genre in its own right, so I try to avoid anything that I saw described as things like grindcore, unless somebody had really, one of the guys had recommended it, or even things like death doom, and any sort of melodic death metal as well. I just tried to stick to things that I thought would fit into that sort of standard death metal origins. So after Dismember, an album recommended by the Rock Scout and Metal Mickey, and that was a Necrophobics, The Nocturnal Silence from 1993, some more Swedish death metal. Is it Blackened Death, maybe? I found it really boring and monotonous. Vocals a bit too extreme for me as well. In fact, this one gave me a bit of a headache. So let's move on. What did I listen to next? Well, that was Obituary's Slowly We Rot. I have to admit to having preconceived ideas about Obituary that I completely expected to just hate this album. I've even seen Obituary live. They opened on their Slayer's final tour, and I barely gave them any time to listen to them. They were on, but my preconceived perception of them was that they were a pile of shite and I didn't need to listen to this. Well, they proved me wrong. I mean, this reminded me a little bit, to be honest, of Suicidal Tendencies' debut album. Sort of a bit hardcore-y, if not for like the solos and the growls, very thrashy. Really enjoyed this one. This was on Matt's list as well, and I did pick out the Mark G with a C. The intro he used to use for his videos is actually from the song Intoxicated, and I recognised that just from his old videos as well, so that was kind of a fun thing to find out as I went along. So after Obituary, I moved on to Suffocation's Effigy of the Forgotten, US, 1991. Described as technical, brutal death metal. Vocals were very oink, 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 and it was, oh god, it's absolutely terrible. That was a tough 37 minutes, sorry, thank goodness it wasn't 38 minutes, but it was recommended to me by Liam, the Death Doom Metalhead, so I did have to give it a listen, but sorry Liam, not for me, that one. Pestilence, a Malleus Maleficarum. That's said correctly. Again, from 1991, US. I think most of the albums that I've actually picked are from 1991. Is sort of the sweet spot. 1990, 1991, definitely the majority of the albums. So yeah, it sounds like thrash metal to me. This one went a bit more death metal-y towards the end. Bit on the fence on this one. Not terrible, but not one I would necessarily seek to listen out again for. Now let's move on to... I'm looking at my screen. I can't even read that. I have to look at my notes. It's that Demigod, Slumber of Sullen Eyes. Finnish this time. The first band from Finland on my list. 1992. This one had some good moments, but the vocals, they're a no for me. There's a song on here I think it was called Tears, and yeah, very sort of strange moment in there. I'm gonna have to listen back to that song because I made a note over here. I can't remember why, but Demigod was not terrible, but just again not one that I would probably add to my tiny collection to make it any bigger. Death, Scream, Bloody Gore. I'm sure you're all expecting to see this one in here. I know everyone is massive Death fans, and they've just kind of passed me by because they were under the death metal banner. 1987. From the US, of course. You all know these, you death metal heads out there. To me, this is just thrash metal, and pretty awesome at that as well. I'll definitely explore this band a little further, so you may well see the odd Death album pop up in my collection now, like so many of you have already. From Death, we went to Mind Loss by Gorefest, Dutch death metal, 1991. I thought this was great, to be honest with you. Liam, Death Doom Metalhead, this was a great recommendation, but CD is very hard to find. This wasn't all out speed, it was doomy at times. Just, yeah, this is one I would quite happily add into the collection. So from Gorefest, I went to I went to Unleashed, Where No Life Dwells, still in 1991 in Sweden. Oh, excuse me, too much talking. Again, really, really impressed with this one. So I didn't used to know much about what HM2 was and things like blast beats, but I've been reading up a little bit about it, and I still find when both are used to excess that's the music I really don't like. But this was awesome. Yeah, this one seemed to be quite heavy on the HM2 as far as I'm concerned. I'm using terminology I'm not familiar or necessarily comfortable talking about, so feel free to tell me correct me and tell me I'm wrong in the way I'm describing this stuff. But For the Great Creation of Time, great song. In fact, lots of good galloping songs on this one. Yes, great. I would happily have that in the collection. Edge of Sanity. Nothing But Death Remains. Still in 1991, still in Sweden. The intro for this album reminds me of Europe, to be honest with you. Europe tribute album. But it was very thrashy, but the death vocals were not very inspiring for me. Musically good, mostly okay. Only about 30 minutes long as well. Not one that overly impressed me, but not terrible either. In fact, why do so many death metal albums have really kind of melodic or even orchestral type intros to them? Don't know. Yes, Edge of Sanity to Deicide, self-titled album, 1990 US. I found this quite repetitive. In fact, I listened to this one after work, and I actually sit in the sofa. I actually fell asleep very, very briefly. Vocals are a bit like a movie demon, when the bad guy goes crazy and turns into a monster. I'm clearly on my own here in deciding that this isn't an album that I would particularly listen to, because Mark G, Mr. Boulder, Thomas, Metal Mickey, and Matt all recommended this album to me, but it's one that didn't do a lot for me. Sorry, fellas. Gorguts, Considered Dead. The only Canadian band I think I have in this list. 1991. Really enjoyed this one. It's got a really rich atmospheric sound. Don't mind the vocals at all, which really surprised me, because I couldn't understand a fucking word of them. I like the slower, quieter, bassy moments, but there's a lot of thrash metal in here. Mr. Boulder and Metal Mickey, great recommendation on that one. Cannibal Corpse, Eaten Back to Life. Is this the newer cover? Or I know Metal Mickey was showing on his Instagram recently that there were two covers, and one of them was no one likes the new one and they all want the older label, but I don't know enough to know which is which, to be honest. But I do know it's 1990 US thrash metal, and I do know that I'll never listen to it again. Notes here are barking bollocks, repetitive riffs, lots of tub thumping drums. Just yeah, let's move on. Pungent Stench, not one that was recommended. Cannibal Corpse wasn't, to be fair, but Pungent Stench, for God your soul, for me your flesh. I picked this one just because of the name, really. Just thought it was funny. Austrian, 1990. Drumming absolutely does my head in, monotonously relentless, which may well be the appeal for people that love death metal. But oh god, it's headache inducing for me, and it sounds like a zombie Lemmy on vocals as well. Didn't do anything for me whatsoever. Benediction, the only UK band in the list. People may have expected Cancer maybe to be in the list, but I heard they were a bit more grindcore in their first album, so again, let me know if I've got that wrong. But this is Subconscious Terror, from 1990, as I say, Benediction from the UK. Nothing wrong with it per se, but it just didn't float my boat. A little bit samey throughout. Maybe I'm just not ready for this kind of death metal yet. Vader, another band I've actually seen live. I saw them supporting Testament a few years ago, and again, I didn't really pay too much attention to them when they were on, although I watched the whole set. This is the Ultimate Incantation from 1992. Vader, of course, being from Poland. It's 48 minutes long, which seems long for an early death metal album. It was relatively engaging, and it kept me interested throughout, but I'm just not sure I would buy it and listen to it very often, if I'm honest. I don't even know what number we're up to now. What number are we up to now? We're up to about 20, so two-thirds of the way through. Now, this is Merciless with The Awakening, early 1990 Swedish death metal. I knew I was going to like this one for the first 10 seconds we're in. I just thought, yes, this has got to be one that I'm going to really enjoy. But there's always a chance with death metal that the vocals are going to ruin it when they kick in. But thankfully they didn't. I found this one very thrashy and really enjoyed it. Sentenced, Shadows of the Past, more Finnish death metal from 1991. Again, I found this one really engaging throughout, thrashy at times, but also doom laden as well. Really good album. As was The Ten Commandments by Malevolent Creation, also 1991, US band this time though. This one certainly has its moments. Multiple stab wounds, sacrificial annihilation, but just, I don't know. I almost had this as a one that I wouldn't revisit, but I'm not too sure. The drums put me off at times, but the vocalist reminded me of Mike Muir from Suicidal Tendencies as well. So I'm a little on the fence, but I think I mostly enjoyed it. So it's one I will go back to and listen to before I would actually potentially purchase. But there we go. Hypocrisy. Does that say Hypocrisy? It does say Hypocrisy. This is Penetralia, 1992 Sweden. Again, has its moments, but it failed to keep me interested for the whole album. Vocals were a bit too monotone as well. Next one's from Sweden as well. This is Grave, Into the Grave from 1991. It's just too blurry for me. Everything just going on at once. Vocals way too much. We'll never listen to Grave again. Demilich, and Nespith. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I don't need to, because it's what I'm never going to listen to again. This is Finnish death metal from 1993. My wife was making a cake in the kitchen and the food mixture was going, and at first I couldn't work out if it was just part of the album or not, because the noise that was going on. I forgot about that. So I'm glad I wrote that down, because I do remember now. Is this technical death metal? It just seemed like everybody was playing a different tune. They're all doing their own thing, and then the vocalist just belched all the way through. Way too big a step into death metal for me. This one it's like the metal equivalent of freeform jazz, with everybody kind of doing their own thing. No, hate it. Let's move on. Autopsy, Severed Survival. Mark G and Metal Mickey. Sorry, Thomas, Merciful Metal. I should have written MM down here. Severed Survival, 1989, from the US. Now, I thought, again, this would be a bit like Obituary, that this would be a band I would instantly hate, because I've heard so much about them, yet not really heard of them, and preconception that I would hate them. But thrashy and doomy, throaty, thrash-style vocals. Why didn't any of you guys tell me about this band before, and that the fact that I would like them? Or maybe you did, maybe I just didn't listen because it was death metal. I can't believe you guys made me feel that these guys would be shit all these years. I'm a bit disgusted with you, especially Mark G and Thomas. Come on, guys. You've let me down by not letting me hear this album earlier. I really do enjoy it. Ripping Corpse. Thomas and Metal Mickey, I think you recommended this one to me. US 1991. To me, this was more sort of thrashy and doomy death metal, but more sort of doomy than Autopsy. Again, really enjoyed it. Great recommendation. Would listen to that one again, no problem. Last three, Immolation, Dawn of Possession, US 1991. This was a little slower. I don't know, would this be considered progressive death metal? Certainly has its good parts. Vocals are a stumbling block for me, which you won't be surprised to hear by now. It was almost a tick, but not quite. Definitely not a bad album, though. Now, Terrorizer. I think Mike, Metal Mickey, you recommended this one. World Downfall from 1989. I was under the impression this was a grindcore album, so had it not been recommended, I wouldn't have put it on my list. It was worth a listen, but to me this didn't really fit into my thoughts about death metal at all, or even the thrashy side of it. Yeah, hardcore, grindcore, I'm not really quite sure what this is. But no, not for me. Didn't really do anything at all. And the last one that we've got is one of the ones that Jürgen recommended that fitted within my parameters, and that was Morgoth and Cursed, 1991 from Germany. Yeah, okay. It was one that didn't really stand out to me at all. It certainly wasn't terrible, but not one that I would necessarily want to rush out and buy or hear again. So there we have it. That's my 30 death metal debut albums in 30 days. I think it's safe to say, if I wanted to draw any conclusions from this, that I'm probably not a death metal head by any means. Looking back at all the ones that had a big thumbs up and put a smile on my face, they are probably closer to thrash than anything else, and that is always, thrash is closer to my heart than death metal ever will be. But certainly the thrashy death metal, and even some of the sort of slower or death metal that had sort of slower doomy parts to it as well, was particularly enjoyable for me as well. But I'll be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments. As like I said earlier, where do I go next? Any other classic debuts that I missed, or any albums after the debuts that some of these guys released? I know some of these bands have been going for the best part of 30 years now. Do let me have your recommendations, and who knows, I may well do a follow-up. Thanks again for all of you who made recommendations for me, and even bigger thanks for all of you that have stayed through this whole video and listen to me embark on maybe a short-lived death metal journey. Who knows? Thanks for watching. Catch you again soon.